Getting the pacing of a story right is a difficult skill to master. It's something I still struggle with, but here's a few tips that I learned in my research along the way that'll help turn your story from a hot mess into something that's going to keep the readers at the edge of their seats. If you're new here, my name is Aaron. I'm a self-published author, and on this channel I talk about the writing process as well as document my journey towards becoming a traditionally published author. The pacing of a story represents how fast or how slow the story feels to the reader as they're going through it. Too fast and they can become overwhelmed, and too slow and they can become bored. I'd also consider the control of tension and conflict related to pacing, although they're not necessarily the same thing. This is going to vary drastically by genre, so for example, a thriller is going to be much more high-paced than a slow burn romance. But generally speaking, you're going to want to have parts where it's feeling fast, bam, 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 and parts where it's much more slower, that allows for your character and your reader to catch their breath and just take the story in. You'll want to consider pacing when it comes to the story as a whole, as well as individual scene to scene to scene. They don't necessarily need to alternate one to one to one, fast, slow, slow, but in general, it's good to have a balance between the two overall, from scenes to scenes, as well as, again, that whole story. So how is this achieved? For faster paced scenes, use short, stabby sentences. The reader can consume the information faster, which is going to make them perceive the events as taking place faster. Having large amounts of white space on the page, such as the case with snappy dialogue back and forth, can also contribute to a scene's pace feeling faster, especially when they're not bogged down by a bunch of dialogue or action tags. Not that those things are bad necessarily by any means, but they're not going to make it feel quite as fast-paced. On the other hand, for slower-paced scenes, you can use significantly longer, drawn-out sentences. Since it takes longer for a reader to read a sentence with more words in it, it's going to feel like the story is progressing more slowly. Include more descriptions or throw in some navel-gazing or various facts that aren't happening chronologically as the story goes. This isn't directly related to pacing, but in general, you also really want to make sure you're varying the length of your sentences and the structure of your sentences, but that could be a whole other video all on its own. Here's just a little example to demonstrate the same exact scene, the same thing happening, and having it written as a fast-paced scene or as a slow-paced scene. Fast-paced. The gun went off. Rick crumpled to the ground. He tried to say something. Only a wheezing sound escaped his lips. Versus slower paced. Sally squeezed the trigger, and the muzzle flash illuminated the faded graffiti covering the steel beams of the underpass. This wasn't the first person she had shot. In the war, the combat veteran had over a dozen confirmed kills. The scent of burnt lightning filled the air. Rick grabbed his torso, hot blood already soaking through the shirt Sally had gifted him as he collapsed to the ground in slow motion. The dying man said, though it more closely resembled the sounds a goat with pneumonia would make, rather than actual words. There you have it. The same exact story, the same beats, the same action is happening. One, very, very fast-paced. It was 3 or 4 sentences. The other, even though it's still an action-y type scene, it feels much, much slower because we get more description, more vivid, things about the characters, that much. One of these isn't right or wrong, and neither is the other. It just depends on the scene you're working on and the book, the story, what you're trying to do, whether you want it to feel faster or slower for the reader.